We're going to be talking today about what you need to do to set up your SketchUp model for working in layout. We'll just talk a little bit about the actual layout program, but if you were at the last seminar on Wednesday, we talked a bit about doing scenes and things of that nature in SketchUp, and that's really part of this. Is what you're going to do with layout is actually import scenes from your SketchUp model that you've preset. So what I'm going to do here today, or initially, is to just look at a project. And I think we looked at this project in the previous webinar, and we'll show you that same project here in layout. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this particular thing, but I want to show you what you would expect as a result of setting up layout. By the way, all that setup that you did, scenes and things of that nature, would also be what you would do in SketchUp to export to AutoCAD or other similar CAD systems. So we'll get to it here. What you're looking at right now is the layouts, basically the screen, the organizer, whatever you want to, what they call that, graphic user interface. And it's similar to SketchUp in a lot of ways and dissimilar in certain ways. This is not a place where you build a SketchUp model. It's where you display the SketchUp model in essentially a 2D format. What you're looking at here is page 1, and I'll show you how to do all this. You can see along the right hand side there's a title block that you would create in layout. Off to the right here is what they basically call trays, and these trays, which 2016 in SketchUp has taken on this same visual effect. These trays open simply by clicking on the gray bars, or close by doing the same thing. I'm going to go just to the bottom part of this right now, and by the way, you can organize these trays any way you like. You can just click on them and drag them to the position that you want them in. So you're not stuck with that. It's not necessarily a default. To move around in layout, there's a couple of ways. Just right click on one of these. That's it, and then go to customize. And what you're going to get is, just click on commands. You'll get a list of all the different commands that you can use in layout. Find the ones you want. You just click on it and drag it up into this toolbar up here. So if you like toolbar icons, you can get it this way. If you like pull downs, you can get these same commands from there. There are some shortcuts, just like there are in SketchUp, that you can use. So we'll get beyond that. But anyway, keep in mind, this probably will not look like that on this toolbar up here. So you have to build it, much like you might do in Mac. So one of the nice things in layout is that you can create a set of plans, which is not possible really in SketchUp, and organize your plans to whatever way you want them. I'm just going to click on these as we go along. Site plan, and you're going to notice there's dimensions on this. This is actually the SketchUp drawing, an image of it. It's not the actual drawing, but it's an image of it, if you will. Dimensions added. You can build these schedules, things of this nature, in what's called scrapbooks. So you basically you draw them and save them in a scrapbook. You can also move from page to page up here in the toolbar. There's left and right. We'll click on one of those just to show you. And if you remember the SketchUp model we looked at initially, this is that. These are the scenes that we created, or you saw that were created in that office building layout. The column plan. So if you recall, all of these things were done in SketchUp. The floor plan. Things have been added here. You're going to notice there's dashed lines. I'll zoom into this a little bit. So you can add all these dashed lines. All the text has been added here. The notes have been added here. The dimensions have been added here. Even these grid lines have been added here. And the poching for these walls, this gray color, has been added here. The brick pattern over here has been added in layout. So there's a lot more you can do in layout. That conceptually, you basically just draw the basic drawing in layout. In SketchUp. This has all been extracted from the SketchUp model. This is that roof framing plan that we were looking at. You can see detail bubbles have been added. X's have been added here for the skylight openings. Notes, as you saw before, and this grid has all been added here. Roof plan, you remember the one from Wednesday. Now what's added is roof drains. The pitches in the roof slopes have been indicated, and notes have been added, and a few dimensions. The elevations that we created previously, now we have some floor levels and some roof levels and notes. In general. Okay. By the way, you can hit Shift Z here to go back to kind of a zoom extents, if you will. Again, elevations. This is actually, and these are all to scale, by the way. We will be talking about how to do that. Actually, not today, but we'll get into that on Monday, I guess. That particular piece is in large detail, and what it is just this piece right here up in the right corner of this rear elevation made larger. Think of layout as basically the same as AutoCAD paper space, model space, because that's what you have. The model is kind of nice here. It's the model space, and the paper behind it is the paper space. The reality is these all have viewports. Sections. Now these get pretty nice because you can add a lot of information here. And you can cut detail wall sections if you like. Here, poching has been added. You can add materials. I think if I get close enough to this, you can see there's gravel. There's a lot of materials available to you in layout that you don't really have in SketchUp. And there are, in SketchUp it'd be very difficult to apply materials to a section. As I said before, you can do enlarge details. So these are just little pieces of the section that we already cut, or you can create a section. But these are windowed in. In other words, the viewport has been reduced. These have been set to a scale of 3/4 inch equals a foot. Everything else, for the most part, you've been looking at is a 1/4 inch scale. With SketchUp, obviously, that's even more difficult. Setting up different scales on the same page would be nearly impossible in SketchUp. In layout, these could actually all have been at different scales. Details. These were all created from scenes. If you recall, some of these scenes we had created or you looked at before in SketchUp. Interior elevations, which we looked at in SketchUp as well in the last seminar or webinar. And our furniture plan. So all this was created in SketchUp with the information that you see, room names, the furniture schedule, the title block, all done in layout. So, by the way, I think I said this already, but if you want to export to AutoCAD, you would do the same thing in SketchUp that we were doing for layout. Here we insert the drawings into layout. There you would export the drawings to AutoCAD. If you have any questions about the AutoCAD thing, let me know. But you have, I don't know how many of you have the copy of my book, but it's also in there. Very simple. It's almost a no-brainer. So here's a typical project. I think I showed you this on Wednesday as well, but we'll use it for an example of what to do to set up your drawing in SketchUp for importing or exporting. They actually call it inserting in layout. So the terminology is a little different from SketchUp. A scene, now you can import, insert a three-dimensional image in layout. You're not restricted to just 2D. So you could actually use this image in layout. You'll notice that these are all made up of scenes like we talked about last time. And these scenes are basically recalled in layout. We'll get actually to that. before we're done today. So this was one where actually I had the client, they wanted to look at roof pitch, a pitched roof and a flat roof. So these are different scenes, exhibiting that. Elevations, and we'll show you how to do this. This is the kind of thing, again, you could set this off to AutoCAD or Layout, whichever you'd like. It's the exact same process either way. And the same, click on the tab actually. Same thing here. All of this would show in Layout, all the entourage, the people, the trees, everything that's in this drawing would show up in Layout. Even the materials. Floor plan, second floor plan, roof plan. And these are the same thing we did the other day, scenes set up with different layers turned off or on, sections cut, that sort of thing. Interior. So again, you can show this in Layout. Here in this case, I actually set it up also as a rendering scene. In Layout, in the end, we can actually put renderings, photographs. You're not stuck with just the SketchUp drawing itself. You can put PNGs and JPEGs, pictures that you took, virtually anything you want. And the same thing with the kitchen. Okay, so what do we do? I'll go back to the basic model here. And I'm not going to show you how to draw a model here because that's not what we're talking about anymore. We talked about that on Wednesday. And what we talked about on Wednesday is an integral part of what we're going to do today. So what I want to do is show you the first floor plan. And then we'll zoom out of this and orbit up. So you can see what it really is a section. That's critical because what I want to have happen, I'll zoom into this, these edges that are cut where the wall is cut are actually heavier in SketchUp than a typical line. And you can see that here pretty well. That's actually controllable, that line weight. So you can do it in Layout, but you can also do it in SketchUp. Let's see where I want to go. That's controllable under Styles and Edit. And the last little icon here in the Edit tab is called Model Settings. And what I want you to see right here, there's section, oops, sorry. Where's my styles? Let's keep it open. Click on that little thumbtack up there and this will stay open for you. Section cut width. If you watch these walls here, there's a number here. And the higher this number, and I'll exaggerate it here, the thicker those lines will become. Didn't change. Come on, work for me, baby. There we go. Okay. Sorry, the number lock on my keyboard wasn't locked. So this is what I'm talking about. The idea behind this in my mind is, in typical drawings that you might do, anything you cut a section through would be typically a heavier line. Obviously, you can change this to whatever you'd like, whatever looks good to you. Even if you make a change here in this SketchUp model and you've already put it in Layout, you can just update the drawing in Layout and it's going to reflect these changes, which for me is the key in using Layout. Exporting to AutoCAD, you're not going to have that opportunity. In Layout, these things are tied together. So SketchUp and Layout are linked dynamically. So what does that mean? Any changes you make in the SketchUp drawing will be reflected in the Layout drawing. So you do it once, you don't have to do it numerous times. Elevations, sections, roof plans, all of that are going to all reflect the changes you made. So you only have to make them once. So I'll go back to this a second again. See how heavy that is? I usually set that at 2 just so you're aware of what I do. That's actually a section cut. Don't fall into the trap of I'm just going to look at the model from the top. Cutting a section is much more effective because of that heavy line. And if you just look from the top of your drawing in SketchUp, you're not going to get cuts through windows. You're going to see just the top of the wall. So you won't see where these windows actually are. This is a matter of section cut. I'm going to turn on the section planes. And you can see what's happening here. I've got numerous section cuts through here. But the one we were just looking at for the first floor is here, this one that's orange. If I want to change that section, if I use the move tool, I can grab that section, move it up and down. If you watch the model over there in the center of the screen, you can see that that section cut is being changed. Its location is being changed. That doesn't affect the scene at all. The scene just says, okay, you have a section. I'm going to show that section, wherever it is. What you're seeing here is a section toolbar. If you don't have that, go to View, Toolbars, and find sections down in here, section, and check that. Just a little tiny one, but it's not included other than the actual section cut tool in the large tool set. So go to make sure you have that open. Because what this does is it controls here, the first one, whether the section cuts are actually off or on. Here it's off. No, it's on here. Off. No, I guess it's on. That's the section plane. I'm sorry. All that is that gray section plane. The next button says the section cut is off. So you can see what's happened. The section cut eliminates, here, get the right one, eliminates everything that's above it, which you would expect in a section, and turning it off leaves everything open. So that section is looking down, and everything that's above that section is going to be turned off. If you see your screen turn gray like this when you have sections in it, that means you've got the section planes turned on as such. So you can see they're there. And if you turn that off, they're going to be gone. That plane just gives you an image of where that cut is. It has nothing to do with the actual cut. And then turn the section cuts off, and you'll see them either show or not show. So floor plans, not elevations, but sections, obviously. Use the section cut tool rather than just looking from the top. I guess that's the whole point of this. I'll move this over here off the screen. Okay, so these are the scenes that you would export into Layout, or like I said, AutoCAD as well. We'll go back to just the working model, and I'm actually going to do some new drawings here. So what would you do in SketchUp to export to Layout? That's really the whole question here, right? First, say I want to get an elevation much like this right elevation. How do we get to that? That is actually a view from the standard views, which you can use these little houses up here, which represent an isometric, a top view, front, right, back, and left. Or you can go to camera, standard views, and you can pick them here as well. They're exactly the same thing. And it needs to be in parallel projection. So without parallel projection being selected, and without one of the standard views being selected, you're never going to get a dead flat elevation. Do not try to do this manually. You're going to have a heck of a time. I did that once and exported to AutoCAD and proceeded to try to fix the drawing, and then realized I had made this error. When you don't do this, you get all jagged lines in AutoCAD and in Layout. So how do we get to that? Go back to this working model flat. Let's make a new scene. I'm going to right click and just pick add. And that's just to record what I want to do here. So let's say we want to create this elevation of this side of the house. First pick a standard view, and hopefully I pick the right one. If you don't, that's the top. That's not going to make any sense. Okay, that's it. Right now that's in perspective. And you could use that, if you want to include that in your layout document, you can do that. It's kind of a nice drawing. But if I set this with the camera tool to parallel projection, that's my clean elevation. Okay, so this is how you get there. It's pretty simple. Standard view, parallel projection, and you'll have that. Now there's people in here, which I probably maybe want or don't want in layout, and they're all on a layer. So if I go to the layer people, where am I? There we go, people. Turn those off. That's probably a good idea. Whether or not you want the sun on or not is up to you. Typically in a construction type drawing, you probably don't. So here I would go to the sun and turn that off. And we have our elevation. And then just update this scene. And I'm going to pan this down a little bit. And it doesn't really matter where on the screen you will have this, because in layout you're actually going to have a viewport that you can tighten up on this drawing, get it down to exactly how much you want to show. Right click on this and I'm going to pick up update. Now in scenes, a good idea here, especially if you're exporting to layout, is name these scenes. So I'm going to call this front elevation. I already have one, so I'm going to call this 2. Just to keep things clean. Well, what happened here in layout is this is what I would insert into layout, this exact drawing. How do I get them in layout? I recall these scenes. So let's do one here for, say, the second floor. And I know we already have one, but I'll show you how to do this. Let's do that. You can see it's right now still in parallel projection. I'm not crazy about that for doing scenes or sections, so we'll go back to the camera menu and put it back in perspective. Let's do a section through this living room here, or maybe even the stairs. Let's do the stairs, a little more interesting. So going to the section tool, it's in the large tool set or in the section toolbar. Click on it and you'll get this plane. And you notice the plane tries to jump all over the place. As you move it, you can see that's on the green axis, that's on the red axis, because it's turning red. On the blue, if we're on the horizontal plane. So these section cuts are perpendicular to the axes that they're on. So don't get confused by that. It's perpendicular to it. Once you have the scene oriented the way you like, find a surface, and you can hold shift here to keep that particular orientation. So we'll just drop it in here. We can always move this later. I just clicked and dropped it in there, and it created that scene. And you can see as soon as I did it, all the section planes are also turned on. That looks pretty good. We cut through the stair. I kind of cut through this vase down here, so I may not want that. Maybe I move this back a little bit. The orange one is the active section cut. To make it purely active, you click on it, and you need it blue. So just click on it. That's 100% sure that's the active section. And then use move, and we'll drag this out a little bit, or maybe in a little bit. I'm trying to get rid of those vases. That one might be okay. Now here's the kind of cool part. Say I want to orient this section to this plane. You know, normally you might have to find yourself doing all of this, right? Orbiting, zooming. If you right click on that current section plane, you can see it says active cut, which is fine. But there's another option here for align view. Click on that. What's happening is it's taken that section cut, that building now, and making it essentially parallel to that section plane. This right now is still in perspective, which is kind of fun. You can use that if you like. Or if you set this again in parallel projection, you'll get the dead flat section, which is obviously a little better for construction drawings. I still have a little of that vase in there. I guess if I were doing this in the end, I might eliminate that vase, but I'll just leave it for now. But what I want you to notice here, see all these areas in SketchUp that are just kind of blank, sort of odd lines and things showing up in there. These are recessed lights in the ceiling. That's stuff in your SketchUp model you're probably not going to be able to get rid of, but in layout you can cover this over, essentially poche all of this stuff. So I'll make another scene here. Let's back out a little bit. Turn off these section planes. Make sure you do, because it's going to record whether they're off or on when you make this scene. We can zoom in a little bit if we like. All these straight lines down here are actually part of the topography, so we could turn that off if we wanted. I think I've got a layer for that. Here's the magic to layers. Let's see, it's not landscape. I think maybe lot, yeah. So I've got that on a layer called lot. And I'll just turn that off, because for this it's kind of annoying. Another good reason to put things on different layers, especially if you're starting to throw things out to layout or AutoCAD. And I'll just say layout from now on, but you could just toss in the or AutoCAD thing if you like. Here I'll go ahead and right click and add a scene. And then go to the scenes dialog, take a second, and pick, let's call it section B. Make sure you name these. Don't leave them as, just generic things, because when you get the layout, you're really going to want to know which one's which. So those are sections. Floor plans, very similar. I'll go back to this working plane. Floor plans, you want to do exactly the same thing with a section, but now you're going to cut it horizontally. So I'll go back, put another section in here with the section tool. Here on the right direction. And you can see what's happened as I've cut through the walls. I'm a little bit high because this is not what I want. I want to be able to see those windows cut. And I think, in a typical drawing that you might do, as we've all been taught, a section should be cut about 4 feet above the floor. So select the one you just put in, and it's going to be the orange one. Use the move tool and drag this down. And get it to a point where you want. You can always zoom in a little bit if you're not sure. That looks pretty good. I've got a cut. We can see the counters. All of that stuff is in there. I'm going to go again to, this time, top view. And this time, parallel projection again. And there's my floor plan. I'll turn off these planes. And if you want to be a little kind of cool with shadows, you can be. If you're just doing a presentation, that might be fun. Set them so they look better. It's a nice sort of effect at times. You can use layout to just do presentations. It doesn't have to be just construction drawings. I've done quite a few of them where we've presented to city councils, things of that nature, just as design drawings initially. I'm going to pan this. I don't want to orbit it. That's a mistake. Don't orbit when you're doing this. So zoom into this a little bit. The fact that this stuff is selected, it's blue, doesn't really matter here in this case. And I'm going to add a scene for this. I don't think I did that yet. Add. And we'll call it 2ND. Oh, we've got to go to the Scenes tab. If this isn't open, you see that blank space, click on that gray bar up here. This is in SketchUp, remember, we're still there. And second floor. Hit enter. We're done. So now, these things that I've done, that I've created here as we've gone along, second floor, front elevation, section B, okay? They're all scenes, and you need these when you get to layout. All your layout drawings are set up in SketchUp. Working model gable, I'm going to get this back to this point, and I want to cut a section through the other direction. And you whatever drawings you want, you can always come back and add these scenes if you want. You don't have to do them all at once. You have any opportunity you want to keep adding to this. So we'll cut a section there. Now that one's red because there's another program running here that's called Scalp that will make this stuff red. And just ignore that for right now. We'll not talk about scalp. Well, what scalp does in general is it allows you to add materials inside of these red planes. That doesn't look like a real good spot. That's a little better. Okay, so that's the same thing we did before. You can click on that blue plane, right click, and pick Align View. And then camera set to parallel projection. And we have a section cut the other direction. I'm just going to click outside this. Kind of ignore that red stuff. Okay. That is that other program. I'm not sure. I haven't actually exported one of these to layout with this set up like that. I'll just leave it for right now. Let me see if I can fix it. Yeah. See here, section cuts in the styles dialog. It's set as red. That's why this is happening. The scalp program does that. And I want to go the other way. I want to go to the left. Make these all black. So this is the color modifier in SketchUp in the styles dialog box. And now it's back to black. This has the sun on, which again, if you like that, you can do it or not. The section cuts here are also controlled by that section cut line width. We'll just go ahead and add one here. Well, let's save it as a new style just to keep ourselves out of trouble. And we'll update that just to make sure. Didn't really have to do that. Let's see, go to Scenes and change this to Section B. Again, name them as you go along. I think that's the best idea. I guess that section should be Section A. We already have a Section B, so I'll change that. Backspace, change that to A. Now, one of the things that's happening here is that the sections are in different places. You know, they're not next to each other, which really doesn't matter, but I like to organize them so they are. So if we move that, we can move these left or right. We'll move that left so section A and B are together. In layout, this doesn't matter too much, but maybe better to be a little bit organized. It's going to show up as a list in layout. So let's say we want to do an interior elevation of the kitchen. That's actually pretty good, but we can do this a little better. And I'm going to go ahead and rotate this out. Section does this for you, but now I have all this other stuff here that maybe I don't want. Maybe I don't want that island in there. I'm going to go back to, let's leave it in parallel. It works better in parallel projection. So if you use the camera guy, or I call him camera guy, position camera, you take him and grab him and set it. I want to get this island out of the way. So I want to set this behind the island. Click, and I'm just going to drag this out perpendicular to that cabinetry there and let go. What's going to happen here is I've created a nice clean elevation of that kitchen. Don't need to set it to any kind of parallel or align with or anything of that nature. Using that camera tool, like clicking on one place, holding down the mouse button, dragging it. Now this has to be perpendicular to the face you're working with. You'll get a nice clean elevation. Obviously this might be nice in your drawings. The other thing I want you to notice here is that these walls that have been cut through are actually not cut through. You can see they're not heavy lines. I kind of like this for elevations because it's cleaner. I don't have that heavy stuff all over the place. And these are light fixtures. We can start to cover some of that stuff up if we like. And again, it doesn't really matter the exact view, but get it close. What's happening here is when you put that guy in there, everything behind him, whatever direction you're looking, will be eliminated. Much like a section, but truly not a section. This is what's called a slice. So you can look at this from a little different point of reference. It's nice for elevations interior. I'll go ahead and add a scene for this. And go to scenes. And we'll call it kitchen elevation. Now, as I said, you don't have to get them all at one time. You can do this later, but I'm trying to show you the different variations here. One other thing that we'll look at is, let's look in this elevation that we created. I'll use this one. What I want you to see here, and maybe you don't want this to start showing up in your layout drawing, is all the stuff in the background is showing. You can see the staircase through there. This would happen with AutoCAD as well. That might be a little disconcerting. That's not really what you're looking to show. The stairs in there, maybe, that might be kind of nice, but some of this stuff, say in this window, is a little bit out there. I mean, it's going to look confusing. And in layout, unfortunately, you can't go in there and erase all these lines. You could in AutoCAD, but you can't in layout. So what do we do with that? What I like to call it, and there's another man out there, Matt Donnelly, who does a lot of this layout stuff, has a book out there called From SketchUp to Layout. So if you want to look for that, it's not a bad reference. We create what's called a mask. So I'm going to set a plane in behind this wall that we're looking at and mask off all this stuff in the background. And how do we do that? Right now, I think the best way is we're going to turn off the layer for this roof. I'm going to click on it and see what layer it's on. Up here it says it's on roof flat. I'm going to go to that layer and turn it off, roof flat. So now I can see inside this whole thing. I'm going to go back to perspective because it's just a little easier to look at. And all the stuff we're trying to get rid of is in behind this wall. So all these things in the background are a little disconcerting to me. So how do we fix that? First thing I want to do is make a layer. And I'm going to call it mask, M-A-S-K, front. I think that's where I want to be. Yeah. I want to name it pretty much the same as this scene up here. Now it doesn't have anything to do with scenes. It can if we want to work this with the layer. But what I want to do is build a plane inside of this, behind this wall, so I can mask or block off everything that's back behind there. So how do you do this? First I want to make sure I'm on that layer, mask. So we need to go to layers, mask front, and pick the radio button, so that's our current layer. And normally I'll do this with tape measure tool and create some guidelines. I want to get back in here, right where, make sure I'm in the right place, right there, double click. I'm on the inside of the wall. Let's go back to wherever we were here. So I can get to it. Let's go shift zoom. Good reason for shift zoom or zoom extents is exactly what I just did there. And then we'll do the same thing up here in this corner. All I'm doing is mapping out the width of that wall. Now I'm going to use the line tool and just draw on the green axis here, please. There we go. And up, I can be a little bit arbitrary here right now. Stay on axes and make that plane. At this point I can get rid of those guidelines if I like. I'll double click on that plane, right click, and make that a group. I'm going to make it a group so that it's simple to deal with. I'm not going to mess up this model by doing it. And then just move it down onto one of these edges in a place, and we can always move it later. But you can see what's going to happen here. I'm going to slide this into the model, drag that down vertically. Not sure if you knew the height, you could draw this even easier, but you can do this. Just stay on blue. Not too far off, actually. It's not bad. And that actually would work. Let's get inside this just to make sure that that thing's painted white. It's not. It's some odd thing here. So pick white, or if you want to make yellow behind there or whatever you'd like to do, you can. Now you can see what's happening. Basically, I've put a plane in there. Now when I go back to this elevation, you can see all the stuff in the background's hidden. All the doors back behind there, the fireplace, all of that's hidden. I would turn the sun off. You can see how much cleaner that is. So think about what kind of depth you want in your drawing. If you're not looking for this particular stuff to show in the back, fine. This is the way to do it. And I would update this particular scene because I've now added that other layer in there for that mask. So I want to make sure that stays on. So going back to this, same problem. I'm not going to do that because I kind of like that look. But if that stuff behind starts to bother you, that's the way to do it. You probably have to create maybe as many as 4 or 5 masks, depending on which way you look at this. Okay, so we have all of our drawings, and we may need more. But these are the ones that I'm looking at for layout. And again, like I said, they can work as well for AutoCAD. There's our kitchen elevation that we just picked. You see this says working model. What that means to me is I've stripped this down to the bare essentials. There's no people, there's no trees, there's no cars, there's no extraneous information here. And I make this because it's faster. SketchUp doesn't have to remember all these things. I should, as a matter of fact, turn off the sun as well. I'll go ahead and update this. So any changes you make sure you update these scenes. I had a question on Wednesday why you keep updating. I update because I made changes. And I want to save those changes. Okay. There's that plane. See that? I don't want that in there in this particular scene in this first floor. So I need to go over here to layers. And I'll set this at any layer besides mask and turn that off. Now I've made a change. I've turned that layer off in this scene, so I need to update this. Second floor, I would expect the same thing. There's that mask. Go back and turn that off again and update this scene. Roof plan gable, it's not going to show up there. And the stairs we looked at before, and the kitchen. So I'm not going to go through all of this, but any views you want to show in layout, you want to set them up here. And like I've already said, you don't have to know them all right now. You can set them at any point in time. Make sure that you save this, everything that you do here, because what's happening in layout is it's going to go back to find the last saved version of your SketchUp drawing. So don't expect changes in your SketchUp drawing to show up in layout unless you've saved the SketchUp drawing first. So listen to my own advice and save it. And you might also notice here in this drawing that this is set in 2-point perspective. You can see it up here in the top left corner. What that does is it makes all the vertical lines in the drawing vertical instead of kind of canted off to any shape. Any direction. The reason for that is clients typically, and even I, in terms of exhibiting this kind of drawing, don't really like vertical lines to be canted. So that 2-point perspective will maintain those lines vertical. It's probably not totally realistic, but it's easier to look at. Let's see if I find my layout drawing. So we were looking at this layout drawing. We're going to go ahead and look at this a little closer, but not this particular drawing. We'll do a new one. So if you want a new drawing, go to File and New. And what you get is a blank piece of paper. When you open Layout for the first time, you're going to get something that looks like this, but it's going to ask you to do a document setup. You can do this yourself at any point. When you first open Layout, it basically asks you for paper sizes, things of that nature. We'll show you that here before we get done. But document setup in an initial drawing is the key thing. So under File, Document Setup, and what this does, auto text will skip for right now. You can click on Grid, and this will throw a grid over your drawing, but I'm going to go to Paper first. And you'll notice here under Paper, there are endless sizes. Okay. This is where you set up your paper size, you set up your, essentially, your grid, all of that. So we'll go to Architectural D, which probably most of us use, and just click on that. You'll see the shape of that paper change. I can go to Units and pick the format, so you have either decimal or fractional, depending if you're doing engineering or architecture, and you have precision here. I usually don't set this too tight, maybe 1/4 inch. When you're dimensioning and layout, a little bit of flexibility is not a bad idea. So back to paper. You can, if you want, type in any number you want in these things. So just highlight it. You could do a 37-inch by 22-inch piece of paper if you want. You can also change the color of the paper. Margins you can set up. Rendering resolution. Now this sounds like setting out a photographic rendering, but it's not. What that is we'll get into it, but it's how the drawing starts to look in your in Layout. You can leave it at medium, high. Medium's probably good because that's one of the things that can make Layout grind a little bit because it's going back and regenerating particular views. Grid we'll get back to now. You can say Show Grid. So you have a grid show. Now, if that's not going to print, it's just reference. You can do lines or points. Not sure why anybody wants points. It's a little goofy looking. You can set up a major grid. This is real world numbers now, so 1 inch is actually an inch. And you can set up minor grids, which are subdivisions. So here, each subdivision would be a 1/4 inch. If you want it down to 1/8, then you'd pump this up to 8. You'll see it actually change here. Be careful making that too small. 1/4 is good. So 1/4 of the major grid would be a good idea. If you want it to print, you can click Print Grid, but typically I don't think you would. Okay, that's basically it for right now. So there's our drawing. That's our typical drawing. So anytime you want, you can go back to Document Setup and you can recreate this thing. So you can change it. If I wanted to change it, for example, here to a C size, just click on C size and it's going to change it for me. Okay, so you're not stuck with the first thing you pick. And yes? Metric, I do not think exists here. You have decimal as only the thing you have. So they haven't gone to metric, unfortunately. So it's either inches or decimal inches. Your key, as in SketchUp, the base unit is inches. So you never have to type in inches. Okay, so you've set up a page. Right now, this page is not saved. There's really no information on this. That's good for you. You can scroll the wheel, zoom in and out just like you can in SketchUp. You can hold the wheel down and pan, the center scroll wheel, and pan this page around. So you have zoom and pan. There is no orbit in Layout because it's flat. So you're not orbiting anything anymore. So hold down the middle mouse button, pan it around, and zoom. And just like SketchUp, Shift Z gets you to the whole page. Okay, so what do we do with this? Typically, what I think in most firms, you're going to want to create some kind of title block. And this is where you would do it. I've gotten the question a lot, can I just import my title block that I already have? You know, my CAD title block. Well, firstly, you can't import CAD into SketchUp or into LayOut, but secondly, you can't edit that import, because really all it is an image file that you're going to bring in. So if you were to import something from, say, CAD, it would be an image. So you'd have to convert your AutoCAD file to a JPEG. And then just keep in mind, you can't edit that. It's just an image. So I essentially don't recommend that. The idea here for me would be to draw your own title block. And how do we go about doing that? So you can draw in LayOut. L is for line, just like in SketchUp. Now I can draw a line. And you're going to see that it does two things here. It's creating that line. It also has an axes, so you saw it red and green. I'll go backwards on that. So click, it's got an endpoint. So right now, let's put this on grid snap. So you have two kinds of snaps. You have an object snap, which is this guy here, this little magnet looking thing. And then you also have a grid snap. Right now it's off. So you have two different types. The grid snap will override an object snap. Object snap snaps to the drawing that you put in, and grid snap, as you might expect, snaps to the grid. So we'll put on grid snap right now because I want to be able to draw this title block. And you can see every one of these little spots in the grid it's going to snap to. So I'm using the line tool, and we can do this a couple different ways, which I will. Each one of these, as you recall, is a 1/4 inch. So that right there, that would be an inch. So we can drag this out. That's a 1/2 inch border. And you can determine here, it's kind of off the page. Down here in the bottom part of this screen, it says length. And you can see it dynamically changes as I move. And with the grid on there, it's pretty clean. It says right now 1.5 inches. So you can look at it and take it out where you'd like. Let's make it 2 inches. I'm just going to make a block for a title. Now the one thing I want you to look at as I draw this, you can see that's all turning white. That's what's called fill. Under the shape style menu is where you control all of this. This is probably the tray, the menu, if you will, that you're going to use the most. Fill is what we're looking at here. It essentially will fill in space, and I'll leave it on for right now so you can see what's happening. This is how you add color or solid in LayOut. I'll come across, and you can see it's going to try to find that first point. You can see it's all automatically aligning. Let's call that our title block. That now is an object. Essentially, it's got its own little viewport, which you can see there. You can drag these out and essentially stretch that box. Drag it back so you get where I was. About there. You can rotate this with the little handle. Any angle you'd like, just grab it and hold down the mouse button. It will lock into certain angles. I think 135 should lock in. There we go. 45 degrees essentially. So you're not stuck again with the orientation. I'll leave it that direction. That particular fill is solid. And I may not want that. So in the shape style, there's a fill button at the top. And you can see it's blue. That means it's turned on. And it's white. So it's showing white. If I turn it off, the fill button is turned off. You can see the grid through there. So right now there's no fill. There's basically just essentially a rectangle. And you'll notice that when I draw that, it connected itself. It's one single box now. It's not a bunch of lines. Let's look at the weight of the lines. Under the stroke, let's get off the side here. Stroke is on. Let's pick this particular object. Stroke is turned on because it's blue. And the color is black. If you select that color bar, you can change the color. Colors is a whole nother tray. And we won't get too far into this, but I can make this different shades of gray if I like, or colors I can pick. Whatever I'd like to do there. I'm going to go ahead and leave that as black. Take that slider all the way to the bottom. It's going to stay black. So there's our color. You can change that if you like. And you see it says 1 point. Everything you're drawing in layout is done in points. It's not actual decimals or anything of that nature. So now you got to think a little different sort of photographic kind of numbers. 1 point is the default. So it's fairly small. You can type in a number here. Let's move this thing out of the way. Or grab this down arrow, this drop down box, and you can pick one of these. I've got it selected, so if I pick one of these and make it 2, it should make that. Let's go heavier. It's not showing up to, oh, stroke is not turned on. Okay, make a liar out of me. I think you'll see it. It's kind of small here. Okay. Sorry about that. It's not reacting the way I want. Let's put in a bigger number. Maybe this will be better. There. The size of the lines is so tiny that you couldn't even see it there. So you can pick one from this drop down, or if you don't like any of those, you can type it in. In order to change it, you have to select the one you're putting in there, or the one you want to change. And we'll go back to, and believe me, these are actually heavier lines than they look like on the screen. 1 point. For things of this nature, 1 to 1.5 is fine. Make it 1.5. Now that doesn't look like it changed that much, but it has. That's one way to draw a title block. I mean, if you don't like the box, you don't have to have the box. You can also do it with the rectangle tool, which is an R, or it's this drop down up here. You'll notice here in layout there's several different kinds of rectangles. The one that's typical that we would use, and just grab one corner and drag this out and click, you'll get a rectangle. One that a lot of people use on their title blocks is rounded, so that will give you one with rounded corners. Unfortunately, I don't know any way to control the radius of that, but it gives you that nice rounded corner. There's one that gives you a lozenge, which is essentially a complete quarter round on the end, and another one which gives you bulge, which is a little strange, but it radiuses or curves the sidelines of that. Okay, so you have all those. E for erase, same thing as in SketchUp. You could select them and hit the delete key as well. So let's build a title block. But I want to look at something first. So it's in the inches pull down. Gotcha. All right. Obviously I don't use metric much, but so document setting, document setup out of the file menu, units, and under the inches drop down there are variables here. So millimeter, centimeter, meter. I don't know what points are. If somebody knows what points are, I'd love to know that. Feet and inches. So yeah, they do exist. If you pick, I believe if you say pick millimeter, the precision gives you an option that's 1 millimeter or 0.1 millimeter. I think you would probably draw in centimeters more likely. And you get the same kind of variables. I think to do this, if I'm not mistaken, No, you still have that option. I thought maybe if you set it on fractional, you might not have the variables over here, but you do. Be careful not to set that precision, as I said before, too small. Close. Thank you. Thank you for finding that for us. Okay, so in layout there are layers. Much like SketchUp, they will make things off or on, so you can see them or not. But it has some other functions. One of them being putting things all on this, putting the same thing on every page. So there's a layer. Normally you might have one that shows up here. I've kind of defeated that. But it would show up here. I'm going to make a new one. And it would look like, I think it says on every page. You can leave it like that. I usually change that to title block. So I would double click and change that maybe to title block. And what this is everything that's put on that layer will show up on every page. It's what's called a shared layer. This last box back here on this line is the option to change things to a shared layer. And what does that mean? Every page you make, that information will show up on other pages. So title block's pretty good opportunity for that, right? You'd want that to show up on every page. So I'm going to set that layer to on every page, or shared, I guess is the right terminology. If I click on this right now, you can see it's on layer title block. No, it's on layer default, that little blue dot. Default is the same as layer 0 in SketchUp, so you're not going to be able to turn that one off. But title block right now is the current layer, but this is not on it. You can see it's on default. So you right click and move to layer. You have the option here to do current, which is the old way this used to be done. It was the only option you had, but now it's going to list the different layers for you. And just click on title block. When you do that, and this is in 2016 by the way, that particular item will turn red instead of blue. You can, I believe, I have to look, I'm pretty sure you can change the color of that if you like. But that gives you a hint that that stuff is on a shared layer. Now if I make another page, I can hit the plus button up here in the toolbar, or up at the top, or I can hit the plus button in the Pages Manager. So if I'll use it here, and I'll add a page. It's going to name them page 1, page 2, page 3. Eventually, I like to change them to something that makes sense, like title page, first floor plan, something of that nature. If I go to that page, you can see I'm changing pages here, but everything looks the same. That means that everything that I put on the shared layer will show up on every page. So every time I make another page, I'll just go ahead and make yet another one. You see, just moving this back and forth, it looks exactly the same. And that's what you want. So if we want to draw, I'm going to put a little more information in this title block. Let's get to page 1. And we don't have to, but for me, that's where I like to start. We could draw on any of these pages since they're on shared layers. It's not going to make any difference. Go to page 1. We'll make sure we're set on title block. That little pencil is telling me I'm drawing on title block. And I'm going to set a stroke here at 1.5. That's fine. Fill is turned off. That's fine. And type in an L for line. Again, like SketchUp, you don't need to hit enter. Now, you can set the defaults for these line weights right now. What I like to do is pick the tool first and then set the defaults. Because if you don't, what happens is it keeps going back setting to its original default. So, fill is turned off. That's good. That's what I want. Pattern we'll get into. Remember the stones and the brick patterns and all that. And it's set to 1.5. So these are the defaults. Anytime you pick the line tool after this point, it's going to do what you see here. Now one of the cool things in layout is that you have dashed lines. So I'll pick one of these. and just drag it out. And you can see I get dashed lines. Now you can't get that in SketchUp. You can, this is on shared layer right now, which we don't want, but you can change the scale. So you have options for as small as quarter scale of that line, or 9 times, which might show as a solid line. It's pretty close, but that's 9 times the original scale. So not only do you have the option for these different line types, but you have the option to change the scale of each of these. Okay? Once you've set this, that's going to be your default. So every time you draw something with the line tool, it's going to be the default. Go ahead and I'm going to pick the first one. But you've got lots of different center lines, dot dash, just dots. And like I say, you can control the variables. So if you remember the project I showed you, we had center lines, which I think would be this one. And I changed the scale probably. So the grid was done with center lines, whichever you'd like to use. Set all this up first. Go ahead and erase that. Okay, I'm good. Let's type in L for line. You can see nothing up here changes. This again is in real scale. So I'm going to come up quarter. Let's see, that'd be 1 inch and a quarter. I'm just going to put a line in here and say that's my, place for my sheet number, whatever you'd like to do. Move is the standard tool in SketchUp or in Layout. Apologize. If you don't pick any other tool, and typically when you pick on something, you're going to get the Move tool. Let's click on that and drag this down, holding down the mouse button, and it's dragging it down. And you can see the numbers below it. They're in actual inches. That's what we're working in, real world size. If you want to copy in Layout, hold Control as you move this down. You can move it any way you'd like. If you want to make sure you're on axes here, if you will, you hold Shift and it'll orientate this thing to a specific direction, whichever direction you happen to go. So it's a little clumsy, a little bit. You got to hold Shift and Control at the same time. When you start getting good at it, it's not going to create an issue. Let's go this way. That's at 3/4. And if I type in 3x here, it'll copy that. Just like in SketchUp, you basically can create an array. So these might be places for your name, title blocks, stuff like that. Maybe we go to the top, create something similar. And this is up to you. You can create these however you like. Personalize it. That's the whole point. I'll put a little box up there just to play games with this a bit. Whatever you want to put in here, if I go to these other pages, now you'll see it's on every page. So once we create this, and you can create this as a default template when you're all finished, but the idea here is that you're creating your own particular arrangement. So do that as you will. There is text. Text is a T, or you can pick it with the A up here. 2 kinds of text, by the way. Normal text, just like room names, things like that. Title block work, or label text. We'll show you that as we go along down the road here. There is a text tray. And this is going to look a lot like, say, Word, something of that nature. All the fonts that are in your computer are available. You're not limited to anything that, say, for example, AutoCAD is very few fonts. We'll find one here. So select that. Make sure you select the text tool first. This is the way I like to work. I know there's other ways to do it that other people like, but what I'm doing is setting the default. And let's find one. Verdana, I think, is the standard default font. I'm just scrolling on this thing. If you open it the first time, I've changed a lot of this stuff, so it's not going to show exactly the way it normally does. We'll just pick that one. You have the bold option. Let's pick one that's not just bold. I'm trying to find one that has several options here. There. So you get all the variable options in the font. regular, bold, italic, and just bold. Point size, so set the point size to what you want. This is going to be pretty big for a number in, say, the page number. Here, you need to be careful as far as I'm concerned. We don't want to set this on a shared layer. So we'll go back to the default layer. I don't want this number to show up on every page because it's going to change. And when I change it, let's set this so you have left justified, center, right justified. You can do strike through, underline. These are just in terms of indentations. So kind of a word processor, if you will. So it's going to be a little different than, say, CAD. I'm going to pick centered here and drop it in the middle of this and type in, let's say, 1. And click off to the side and you have your number. You can now move this, so if I grab it, that means I picked it. Look for the move symbol, because you could inadvertently get that unless you really want that. That's rotate and move this up where you want. That's kind of small for me. If I go over here and pick, say, 96, point size, maybe 1 is good, and just drag that where you want. If you have trouble getting it exactly where you want, the closer you are to it, the more refined you can make that move. Okay, so that is not on, I hope, if I got this right, not on every page. If it were, let's make that on every page, just to move that to that other layer. Right click, move to layer title block, I guess. I go to other pages, you can see it always says 1. So I changed it here, double click on it, change it there to 3. If I go back to other pages, it's still going to be 3. So be careful what layer you put this stuff on. We'll put this on the default layer, so right click, default. So now if I go to other pages, it's not going to show. One of the cool things here, though, let's find that. If you take that number and you Control C, copy, and you go to another page, Control V, paste, it's going to show up in exactly the same place on the other page. Now, what page am I on? That's actually 3. We should go back here and change this to 2. And I should have page 1. So again, I can hit Control V and double click on this and change it to 1. So what's nice about cut and paste in layout is that it's going to cut it and then put it back in exactly the same spot on another page. In the end, I would put in some text here. Let's say go smaller, maybe 14, 16. We'll put in things like, say, name. Move that over a little bit. Maybe up. So get close, and you can be a little more precise with this. Now, right now I have grid snap on, I believe. Yeah. So if you get things kind of clicking around on you, you probably have grid snap on. Just like with the lines, copy is start moving it and tap Control. And here I can type in, I think, 2x. Yeah. So again, I can array that if I like. Don't put these on that shared layer. Hopefully I have it. No. If it were shared, it would be red when I click on it. And you know what? I do want these on that shared layer because I want to show them up on every page. So I'll do something different. And this is up to you if you want to be able to modify this or whatever. Now this should show up on every page. Okay. In the end, what I would do with this title block, select the whole thing with the window, right click on it and make group, or just group here in this case. Oh, can't do that because they're on different layers. One's shared and the other is not, so I got to pick out everything that's not on a shared layer. that is. Can't group them if they're on different layers. So now what that's done is that whole thing is going to be movable in one shot. So I don't have to go in and pick all those parts. So let that be a little lesson to me and to you. You can't put things on shared layers and on non-shared layers into the same group. Okay, so that's your title block. Put whatever you'd like in here, your project name. Your company name might be a good thing to put on the shared layer. Things of that nature. What else can I tell you here? Let's look at it a little closer. We've set up the size of the sheet. We've set up a title block. What can we do with this? Make sure every time we open layout, we have this as our format. Under File, you have Save As Template. So if we click on that, it's going to ask you for a name, and it's going to ask you where you want to put it here. So I put that in my templates. And let's put webinar sheet. And we'll say OK. Now what's going to happen now, every time I go to open File, Save As Template, should go to My Templates, Webinar Sheet, New File, New from Template, and there's a webinar sheet. So I apologize. New File, New from Template, and it'll give you the one that you just created. These are two others that I have in here. You can create as many as you like. If we open that, and I won't do it because it's going to look exactly like this, but on a new file, you can actually open this template that you just made. Okay. We're just about at quitting time here, Aurora.